Well, let's get more reaction now from Marchel Alexandrovich. He is the senior European economist at Jefferies International, and he joins me now. Thanks so much for joining me. Let's look firstly at this idea of closer fiscal union. This is something that has been talked about since the European Union was formed. The reason it hasn't happened before is because it's extremely complicated. We're talking about countries giving up some of their sovereignty. Can it be fast-tracked? Can it be rushed through?
I'm not sure that it can. I think it is obviously a hugely complicated process. Countries have to give up a bit of sovereignty for this fiscal union. But I think we are starting to see ground move a bit on this. Obviously, last week we had stability bonds and proposals for that from the European Commission. We had Mario Draghi today talk about closer kind of fiscal integration as well. So I think politicians are still to be convinced, but I think in terms of kind of the technocrats in Europe, they do seem to be pushing for this as a solution. But there are issues.
So if we establish that that is possibly a long-term solution, we certainly need something in the shorter term to try and stem this crisis. Yeah. And the ECB today, we heard, was not going to be unlimited in its bond buying. Now, before, that hasn't been made quite so clear, has it?
I think actually it's pretty much a repeat of what we've seen from Trichet before. Effectively, they do not want to send a signal to the markets and especially to the politicians that ECB purchases are going to be unlimited and and indefinite. I think that's the way of keeping pressure for the political process to move forward.
But what happens then if we get to a point where the ECB has to intervene? They will still do that, right?
I think they'll carry on intervening. They're going to have to carry on for a very, very long time. Fundamentally, we know there's a track record of ECB changing their mind on various issues, things like collateral and various other sort of issues. But I think potentially, at the moment, obviously, Draghi is saying purchases are limited and they want to kind of keep the program fairly small. But I think if we're looking a couple of months down the line, potentially, for instance, if Europe is in recession, ECB have cut rates, let's say, to 0.5%, at that point they might have to do outright quantitative easing, but then justify it not really on the grounds of kind of having to support fiscal policy, but rather to stimulate the economy, same exact route that the Fed and the Bank of England have followed.
Now, the idea of Eurobonds has been squashed down by Angela Merkel every time it's been raised, but you still believe that that will happen?
We do. I mean, who knows what they'll be called? Knowing Europeans, it could be called, stability bonds instead of a Eurobond. But I think the idea is the same, and I don't think there really is much of an alternative. And we're finding that with our clients as well. We've sort of put out a note in July, basically talking about the Eurobonds, and there's a lot of curiosity in the subject, but really not a lot of support from our own clients. Now we can go around talking to the same clients, and everyone seems to agree that that is the only way for Europe to go forward. In the short term, yes, you can have EFSF buying, you can have ECB supporting the markets, but look slightly longer term, 6-12 months horizon, and I think the idea of Eurobonds really very much has to be on the agenda.
Just one question about Eurobonds, if Angela Merkel were to agree to them. We've seen how profligate southern European economies can be. Would it not encourage them to spend again if they knew that the money was sort of shouldered jointly, the debt was shouldered jointly, if you like?
That is obviously a risk, and that is very much sort of at the heart of a Eurobond debate. Obviously, Germany wants to enforce discipline in southern Europe. I mean, it's pretty clear. I guess you have to come up with a mechanism to keep those countries spending and keep them under control. I guess potentially Eurobond could be a club that you join, let's say, in 2 or 3 years down the line, and countries have to prove themselves over the next couple of years. They have to behave responsibly, and then only then would they be allowed to join the Eurobond club, potentially.
And lastly, do you think that we have that long? There has been talk in Herman Van Rompuy himself that there's 10 days to save the euro. Do we have years?
We have years. I think it'll take years to introduce Eurobonds in a kind of fully fledged Eurobonds, because you have to change the EU treaty. In the interim, I think you'd have ECB fill the gap. They can carry on buying. And I think in some ways, Draghi is right. Markets need confidence. Markets need to see a roadmap for Europe. And if we start talking about close to fiscal integration, a fiscal union, and with ECB support, the markets can move on.
Okay. Marchel Alexandrovich from Jefferies International, thank you very much indeed for joining us.